If I gave you this data right now and asked for a report, how long would it take you? By the end of this video, you won't just know how to answer that question, you will have built it. A simple dynamic dashboard that easily answers any data questions that you might have. Most Excel courses are boring. They teach you what the buttons do, but not how to use them. So in this crash course, we're skipping the fluff and we're taking the raw, messy data, we're cleaning it, we're analyzing it, and we're turning it into a simple professional dashboard. So whether you're preparing for an interview or just want to stop doing things manually, this is the only training that you need. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so now that we're in Excel, we see we have a very large data set right here that was passed off to us, and it's our job to clean it up. So I can press Control arrow key down, go to our bottom. We have about 100 rows of data. And then we also have convenient headers up here at the top. So the first thing I want to do is I want to start cleaning this up so everything looks a little bit better and it's a little bit easier to read. So what I'm going to do at the top in row 3 is I'm going to press Control Shift right arrow. And then I'm going to go into our ribbon and press Home. And then under the font section, I'm going to select the fill color and also the text color. I'm going to select blue. And I'm going to select white so that the characters just pop out a little bit. I'm also going to reselect all of this and bold all of our headers as well, so that way they really stand out. But you notice that in column D, we're kind of missing some of the names. So they're kind of cut off there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right tab over into D4, and then I'm going to press Control Spacebar. And that's a shortcut to select the entire column. And then I'm going to press Alt-H-O to select format, and then I to auto-fit column width. And now you see we have all of our names fully listed out. And what this does is this automatically adjusts the column so that the longest text string fits within that column. If I were to go back and undo that, I can also double click between each column, and then Excel will automatically format those for you as well. But the Alt-H-O-Y is just a quick little shortcut that's a little bit easier to use. We notice the same thing between F and G. So again, Control Space, Alt-H-O-I, and we see that it automatically formats as well. Then in regards to formatting as well, we notice in column H, we have price. Let's go ahead and clean that up a little bit. So that way they're just not numbers, but we can actually show dollar signs. So again, I'll press Control Shift down to select the entire column. And then you can press up in the number section. You can press the comma, which will give you a comma style with 1,000 separator. You can also press the dollar sign to get the accounting format. So let's go ahead and press the dollar sign to get the accounting format. And we see that Excel automatically updates that. It looks a little bit cleaner. We know that we're dealing with dollars here. However, we don't have any change. So everything is a nice round number. So I'm going to go ahead and press Control Shift down, select my data set again, and then I'm going to press Alt H and 9, Alt H and 9 again. And what that does is that moves the decimal place, and you have the option of moving it forward, and you have the option of moving it backward as well, depending on what type of numbers you're working with. You might also notice as well, when I start scrolling up and down my data set, that we lose that headers. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to freeze those panes. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of column 4, and then I'm going to go to View on the ribbon, and I'm going to select Freeze Panes. And then you might notice we have a couple different options here. So we have Freeze Panes, and Freeze Top Row, and Freeze First Column. For this instance, we're going to go ahead and use the Freeze Frame option. However, if you want to freeze the top row, you could freeze all of column 1, or if you want to freeze the first column, you could freeze all of column A. For this instance, we're going to go ahead and just use the Freeze Panes selection. And now you notice that our headers are frozen in place, and we can scroll up and down and not have any issues about what data that we're looking at. All right, so the next thing I'm going to look out for is, do we have any duplicates in our data set? This is really important because we want to make sure that we're reporting on accurate data. We want to make sure that we don't have any repeats in our data set. And there's a couple different ways to do this. I've actually made a video on this previously. I'll go ahead and make sure to link that down in the description if you want to check it out after this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the top of our data set. I'm going to go ahead and select B4 and Control Shift down, and then I'm going to go back to the Home ribbon. I'm going to select Conditional Formatting, highlight Cell Rules, and then we have an option that states we can highlight duplicate values. So let's go ahead and do this just as a test to make sure that we don't have any repeat order ID numbers. And we'll go ahead and select that any duplicate is filled with a light red fill with dark red text so they really stand out. We'll press OK, and if we scroll up, boom, we notice that we have 2 duplicates on our data set. We have 2 orders with the ID of 1002. From here, we have a couple different options. We can go in and manually delete the rows. If I go ahead and select row 5, and then if we right click, I can go ahead and just select delete. However, we also do have a way to manually delete our data as well. I go ahead and select our entire data set right here. What I can do is I can go to data, and then we have an option of removing duplicates. If I go ahead and press that, it selects our entire data set and it has all the associated columns and rows selected. I can go ahead and press OK. And then we see that we had one duplicate value found and removed, and we have 100 unique values remaining. So I can go ahead and press OK. And now, as you see with our conditional formatting, we no longer have any duplicates. Pro tip is I like to go ahead and use a conditional formatting first because it's less abrasive. Once you remove those duplicates from your data set, they're gone. Once you start making more edits, it's hard to go back to what you originally had. So I always like to avoid mistakes and go ahead and use that remove duplicate tool as like the last step of the process. Go ahead and make sure that you don't have any duplicates before doing that because it can just be slightly abrasive. Now that we're looking at our data set, you can kind of notice like, all right, we have some issues going on here. One thing that really pops out to me is going to be our customer names. We notice that some are fully capitalized. We notice that some are all lowercase. There might be some additional spaces between them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clean this up, and we're going to use a couple different functions to do that. So the first function that I'm going to use is going to be proper. So in cell J4, I'm going to press equals proper, and we see that our function automatically pops up. We're going to go ahead and press tab to lock it in. We'll go ahead and select our name right here in cell D4 and press enter. And we see that it cleans it up for us. It's no longer fully capitalized. It is presented as it should be with a capital S and a capital J. So we have a couple different options to expand this in our spreadsheet. I can drag it down all the way to the bottom of my data set, which is a little tedious and it's a little slow. And we see that it automatically fills everything in place. But if I press Control Z, what I can also do, I can press Control C, copy it, and then press Control down to get to the bottom of my data set. Go ahead and press Control Shift up and then Control V, and that will paste everything in place. And we have a full list of all of our cleaned up names now. And since I have everything already highlighted, I can go ahead and press Alt HOI, and that would go ahead and clean up our column as well. So another thing you might be noticing with our data set is we have some like extra spaces and things that need to be cleaned up. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and combine functions here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and press equals proper, and then I'm going to combine it with the trim function. And what the trim function does is it will trim out any additional spaces or gaps within our data set. I'll go ahead and select our value again, cell D4, and then go ahead and wrap them in two parentheses because we have two functions in our cell. Go ahead and press enter and go ahead and drop it low. And excellent. We got rid of any additional spaces that we had in our cell. And this is really important because those extra spaces are function killers. So if we, had a lookup value based off of David Lee and we had an additional space in there, our function would not be able to find it because we had that space. So Excel is very character driven in the sense that it has to be a very specific match to what the data says. So with my data copied, I'm gonna go ahead and right click at the start of our data for our names. And then you'll see I have a couple different paste options. I'm gonna go ahead and select the clipboard with the 1, 2, 3 next to it. And this is for pasting as values. I'm gonna go ahead and click that. And now we have cleaned up data, no association with the function, so nothing will break or change later on down the line. So I can go ahead and back over to our data set here with our functions. And I can do one of two things. I can go ahead and delete this, or if I want this for later on, just in case something changes or I copy in some more data, I'm gonna go ahead and press Shift, Alt, and the right key, and this will group my data. So I'm gonna go ahead and group it by columns and press OK. And now you see I have this little line with a box next to it. I'm gonna go ahead and click that, and now our functions are hidden. I can go ahead and go back and forth between I and K. I can go ahead and press this 2 over here and I see my data again, or I can press the 1 and hide it. So a couple of different options to hide that data. I always suggest grouping your data instead of deleting it. The other option is you can go ahead and select the column right here, right click, and you can select hide. However, I don't like that because it's kind of a pain to get back to. You have to go right click and then click unhide. So I'm gonna go ahead and just use this, hide our function right there, and we still have a nice looking data set. So again, looking at our data set, we have product codes, but we're not quite sure what customers are buying which specific product. In a previous worksheet, I have product codes with the associated name and its category. So I'm going to show you a function that we can use to go ahead and look up the product name based on the product code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and insert a new column. So if I click into quantity right here and press Control Space, I can go ahead and select our entire column again. And then what I can do is I can right click on G, and then I can go ahead and insert a column right here. And we see it stays formatted for us, which is fantastic because we're entering that column in within the existing data set. So I'm gonna go ahead and type a new header called product name. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a function called the X lookup to go ahead and find this data. So I'm gonna press equals X lookup. And then I'm gonna find our lookup value, which is gonna be F4. So I'll just use the left key to go ahead and select that. I'm gonna press comma, and then I'm gonna use our lookup array. So I'm gonna go back to our lookup table here, and I'm going to select all of our products. So a very important pro tip here is I want to talk about absolute versus relative references. And I'm going to show you the wrong way on how to do this first. So let's go ahead and finish our formula. I'll go ahead and press comma to select our return array, which is going to be our product names. And then I can go ahead and close my parentheses and press enter. And then we see product code MON-04 returns 27-inch monitor. So just like I previously showed you, we can use this green square in the bottom right-hand corner of our cell to drag this function all the way down to the bottom of our data set. So if I were to double click it, you see it autofills, but we have an error. We have a whole bunch of NAs. So what is happening, if I go ahead and press this function right here, we see that in our lookup table, it's referencing cells B10 to B14. If we go back to our lookup table, B10 to B14 doesn't have any data in it. And the reason is because when we dragged this formula down, we dragged the lookup table reference down with it. And the same for the product name as well. So both of those items are now moving down with the function. But we don't want that. We want to look at a specific data set with a specific table. So if we go back into our initial formula here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the lookup table reference. I'm going to press F4. And you see that it changed with some dollar signs. What that does is that locks those cells into place, making them absolute. So I'll go ahead and do that for our B9 as well. And I'll change our lookup table C5 and then also C9. Press enter. And now let's go ahead and drag that down again, or we can double click to autofill. And now we see we have all the correct answers based on our lookup table. So I'm gonna go ahead and press Control Shift down, and Alt HOI to clean that up again. We'll control back up to bring us to the top of the table. But now you can see if I start thumbing down between each function, we see that our lookup changes, which is correct. We want to move down with the lookup. However, our references in the lookup table are staying static. They're staying absolute because we lock them in with the F4 key, making them absolute as we drop down that function. Alternatively, instead of the XLOOKUP function, we can also use an index match. I just want to show you that real quick because it does have its pros. If we do equals index, this is going to be what we're indexing and what we want to return. So if I go back to the lookup table, I'll go ahead and select our product names, go ahead and press F4 to lock those in, and then I'll press comma, and then we're going to use a match function. So I'll go ahead and get rid of this real quick, and I'll type in match and press tab. We're going to choose a lookup value. So this is the value that we want to look up, and we're going to match it with something else. So I'm going to go ahead and press my product code, and then I'm going to press comma to move up to my lookup array. And that is going to be the product codes listed in our lookup table. I'll go ahead and press F4 to lock those in, and then I'll press comma again, because then we can choose if we're searching for something numerical, we want to return something that's less than, or we can select something that's greater than. But in this case, we're going to select 0 because we want an exact match. And then we're going to use double parentheses because we're using two different functions to lock that in. And then we'll go ahead and press enter. We'll go ahead and double click that green square once more. And we see we return all the same values. I find that this works really well as well. However, I think the XLOOKUP is just a little bit easier and a little bit straightforward. But as you can see, there's different ways to get to the answer that we need to in Excel, and the XLOOKUP and the index match are great ways to search for data within a data set. Up next, we're going to need to calculate our revenue based on our data. So I'm going to type in a new header called the revenue. And what's great about Excel is that it can be pretty smart at times. So it will automatically format our revenue header for us, which is great. What we're going to do is we're just going to do a quick little multiplication. We're going to take our unit price times our quantity and press enter, and we get our total revenue. Again, we can double click to drop that down, which is fantastic. Now you might get a quick question, from your boss or your manager or someone else, or you may just be curious yourself of what was our total revenue for this table. So if I go ahead and press Control down, go to the bottom of our table, there's a couple different ways to calculate this. I can go ahead and press equals sum and then select with Control Shift up our entire data set, and then I'll just, while holding Control Shift, press down once and press parentheses, and we see that we have $160,825 for our total. That's good. What we can also do is, as a quick shortcut, is I can press Alt equals, and then Excel dynamically pulls in that sum function for us. And I'll just scroll up to the top, make sure that we're not capturing anything that we're not supposed to. And again, Excel delivers. We're not capturing the revenue header. We're just catching all the numerical values. I'll press enter. And then we see that we tie out, we have the same amount as before. So that Alt equals shortcut is a fast way to get to our sum function if you ever need it in a pinch. Now, our manager is asking us if we have any priority orders this past month that we need to take care of. So again, I'm going to create another header and just label it priority. And we're tasked with finding any order above $2,000 in total revenue is going to be labeled a priority. So what we're going to use is we're going to use the if function to find that for us. So we're going to press equals if for our if function, press tab to lock it in. And then our logical test is if our revenue is greater than or equal to $2,000, we'll press comma to move on to our next step of our function. And then it's very important that when we want to return a value and it's a character driven, like let's say text, like standard or priority, that you use quotations. Because if I just type in priority, you see I start having a list of functions show up. What I'm going to do is to dictate that we want to return a specific string of characters is I'm going to use little quotations here. And then I'm going to type in priority and then close it in quotations because that's going to be our value if true. Then I'll press comma, and then our value if false, it will be standard. Close that in quotations and then close it in parentheses, and then go ahead and press enter. And we see in our first example in row 4 that we're having a standard order because it's lower than $2,000. However, if I drop this low by double clicking, we see that we have those priorities automatically pop up because they are above $2,000 in revenue. And this is great because it'll start showing us what orders need to be priority. And then if you want to really make this stand out, we're going to do a Control Shift down to select all of our data right here. And then we're going to go up to conditional formatting. We're going to select highlight cell rules, and then we're going to use text that contains. So I'll go ahead and select that. And then I will put in priority, and I don't like the red here, so we have a bunch of different options. So let's go ahead and select green because that stands out. I'll go ahead and press OK. And now we see that anything that is priority sticks out, so we can instantly look at our data set here and we know which orders that we need to take care of. All right, so the next step in our data analysis is we're going to take all of this data that we have created in Excel and we're going to turn it into a pivot table. And the reason being is that we want to very quickly decipher what data we're working with. We're going to search for specific answers. And the fastest, easiest way to do this is by using pivot tables. So back in Excel, a very quick way to do this is we can go ahead and select our entire data set here. One option is pressing Control T, and that will create a table. Alternatively, what you can also do is go to Insert and then select Table from the ribbon. So we'll go ahead and select that. And then we have our full data set selected, and we do have headers. So we'll go ahead and press OK. And then we see we have a nice table here that looks very clean and very sharp. So what we're also going to do is we're going to turn this into a pivot table. So we're going to go back to Insert. We'll go ahead and select Pivot Table, and then you see that Excel automatically picks up, since we're in a selected cell on our table, that is going to be pulling in the whole table. So let's go ahead and bring this over into a new worksheet. Alternatively, you can also select existing worksheet and just select a specific location. But for this instance, we're going to go ahead and select a new worksheet, and then we'll press OK. And now you see we have the beginning building blocks of our pivot table. I'm going to go ahead and bring over our pivot table fields into our selection here just so we can see everything. And what I'm going to do is I want to start comparing our product and how much revenue they made. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down our product name, I can just go ahead and click that. Or alternatively, I can go ahead and drag and drop into our row selection. I can also put it into columns if I wanted to. As you can see, we have full columns. Or I can put it into values and it gives me the number of products that we have. I'll go ahead and put it into rows for right now. Then I'm going to go ahead and select revenue. And you see, again, Excel's pretty smart, so it automatically puts it into my values. If I wanted to put it in columns for whatever reason, I could do it that way. I can also create a filter based off of revenue. So if I want to select a specific dollar amount and only see those items, I can do it that way as well. But for this instance, I'm gonna go ahead and put it in value because I want to compare our revenue, comparatively speaking, for all of our products. And what's really cool is that Excel kept the formatting for me, so I don't have to worry about reformatting any of this. If I wanted to, I can go ahead and right click into my data set right here. And then we can go ahead and select sort. And I want to sort from largest to smallest because I want to see the highest revenue earner from our data. And then we see that Excel automatically updates that, sorting based off of descending values, starting with the highest and going to the lowest. And then it can also see the grand total down there as well. If I wanted to change my design at all, if I didn't want to see the grand total, I can go ahead and turn that off. But it looks good right here, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that in there. So that's a very easy pivot table. Let's go ahead and bring it up a notch. So what's great about pivot tables is it's super dynamic and we can kind of filter everything based off of what we need. So let's go ahead and say I put in the region into our columns. And now we can see a full breakout of each region by each item by our total revenue, which is really fantastic. If I got rid of region, I can go ahead and see it by customer name. Obviously, we have a lot of customers, so I'd actually probably change this around. That way I can see by customer what items that they actually bought and what the total revenue associated with it was. So very quick and very easy dynamic ways to go ahead and format our pivot table to get the data that we need. Let's go ahead and get rid of customer name. I'll bring back product name back into our rows. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and add what's called a slicer. And what's really cool about this is this makes our pivot table very dynamic with just a click of a button. So I'm gonna go ahead and select, let's go ahead and by region, I'll press OK. And now we see that we have a slicer here that will easily decipher and pull out what the revenue is by region. So I go ahead and select East. I see all of the East revenue. If I select North, changes. If we go West, we see all the rest revenue and so on and so forth. So these are great because you can easily shift what selection you want based on what data you have. So now we're going to take this even a step further. I'm going to go ahead and cut my pivot table out. I'm going to bring it, let's say, down here and paste it over. We'll go ahead and bring our region slicer right above it. Go ahead and create another slicer. And let's go ahead and do this one on customer name. I'll press OK. And we see that we have another slicer right here for all of our customers. Go ahead and format that the same way. And then within the slicer, we can select all of our customer names depending on who we're looking for. And then what's great is you can also use these little check marks right here to multi-select. So if you want to see multiple different customers and in multiple regions, you can go ahead and do that and it'll break it out for you. And then we'll just press the filter button to get rid of those filters. And now we're back to our full total. So now that we have our slicers in place, I'm also actually going to add our customer names to our pivot table as well. And then we see that we have this full long list of names associated with each item. I can go ahead and click this minus button and it will collapse all of it just like a normal filter. I can also right click as well and then select expand or collapse. And then we can use collapse entire field. And this will automatically collapse every single filter that is available to us. And it gives us a very tight dynamic pivot table again. And what's really cool in our pivot table is I can go ahead and select our East region. And then let's say I just want to see David Lee. And then we see we have the 27-inch monitor and the wireless mouse. However, I want to expand this just to make sure that everything is correct. So we'll go ahead and expand our entire list. And then we see we're only pulling David Lee for the East region. Now to make sure of that, and select region and pop that into our pivot table. And we see that we have our East region with the product by the customer. Now using the pivot table is great. However, we want to take this a step further with our data analysis. And we're actually going to create pivot charts off of this. So if I go back up to pivot table analyze, I can go ahead and select pivot chart. And we see we have a full list of all sorts of different options here. And we can select our charts here and kind of see what they look like. We can also show line charts as well, which might be beneficial depending on what you're looking at. Pie charts, if the data made sense. Area charts, there's all sorts of different options. We have waterfalls as well, which are super handy. But for this instance, let's go ahead and use a column chart and we'll press OK. And now we see we have a chart here. As it stands, it's not looking all that great. So let's go ahead and make it a little bit larger. What we're going to start with is we're going to start renaming our title of our chart and we'll call this product revenue. What's hard to see though is like we can't necessarily see what our total values are by product. We can see where they are on the bar chart, but so if I go ahead and select my bar chart here, I can go ahead and right click and then we can add data labels. So I'm gonna go ahead and select that. And now we see we have all sorts of different amounts here. And if we wanted to clean this up a little bit, we can select those data series, right click again, and then we can select format data labels. And then over on the right-hand side, we have all sorts of different options here to format our data labels. We can change the number. We can change it to a currency. We can change how many decimal places there are. We can go ahead and change that to 0 because that's going to clean up our numbers a little bit. All right, so for the moment, that looks great. It looks a little busy on our chart though, so let's go ahead and get rid of these lines. All right, so for the moment, that looks great. But what's cool about our pivot chart right here is that it's dependent on our slicers as well. So if I just want to see the East region, I can select the East region and then our chart automatically updates. If I just want to see everything associated with, say, with David Lee, I can go ahead and select that. And now we see everything associated with David Lee. So I'll go ahead and clear those filters real quick. And to go ahead and clean up our sheet a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and select view on our ribbon. And then I'm going to select the grid lines radio box. And that will get rid of all the grid lines behind our sheet, make it just a little bit easier and cleaner to read. I also need to rename this sheet as well. So I'm going to press Alt-H-O-R, and that will give us the opportunity to rename our sheet. I'm going to go ahead and rename it Dashboard and press enter. And then I want to create one more pivot table. So I'm going to go back to our data set here and then click insert. And for this chart, I just very quickly want to see any sort of priority listings that we have. So I'll go ahead and follow the same format that I had for our previous pivot table and go by region, product name, and then customer name. And I'm also going to select revenue, put that into values. However, this time under filter, I'm going to put in priority. I want to see specifically anything that is priority. However, if you have multiple different items that you want to pull down here from this filter, you can go ahead and select multiple items. I'm going to go ahead and select priority and press OK. And now I can see anything listed with a priority notation on it from our table. I'll go ahead and collapse all of this again. And by selecting collapse entire field, I want to go ahead and move this down into rotation. All right, so now that we have both pivot tables in place, I'm gonna go ahead and select into our second pivot table, and then we're gonna go to add another pivot chart. For this one, let's go ahead and add in a line chart right here. I'm gonna press enter, and then we'll go ahead and copy our formatting just so it stays the same size as our other chart. And boom, now we have two dynamic charts associated with our pivot tables and our slicers. So if I want to see specifically the East region, I can go ahead and see the East region for both of those very quick and very easily. We can also change and take those filters off. We can select West if we so wanted to. And excellent, that is how we make pivot charts and a quick dashboard in Excel. I do want to show you one last trick with conditional formatting. So if I go ahead and select all of our revenue right here and go to conditional formatting, we can select data bars, and then we can select an associated fill. So let's go ahead and select red data bar to show our revenue. And then we can see very quickly and dynamically what the biggest numbers are associated with this. And then if I wanted to click in revenue and go from largest to smallest, we see that we have our in order from largest to smallest and those associated data bars. I can press Control Z and go back to the way it was. But now we have a dynamic table showing all of our values. And that's it. That's how we take raw data in Excel and turn it into dynamic dashboards and tables. That way we can analyze our data in a very fast fashion. So if you found this video helpful, go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that notification bell so you catch all the next episodes. Have a great one.